Hi, welcome to HashConf. My name is Fernanda, and I'm here to give you the Hitchhiker's Guide to Terraform your infrastructure and to tell you about some tips that I've learned by using Terraform. So who am I, right? I am a DevOps minion. I really like infrastructure as code. I am a CDCI enthusiast. I really like open source and I advocated for it. I'm also a gamer. I try to play piano sometimes, and I am really struggling to learn Dutch. So I here in this presentation is my GitHub and my LinkedIn and my Twitter. You can contact me or see my work. Currently, I work as a DevOps engineer in Linda. We make software for hospitality. We want the interaction between worker and business to be as smooth as possible with no hassle. So business can hire the best waiters for their restaurants, and also the waiters can be satisfied with their job in the end and with the whole context. So yeah, that's who I am. So coming up with our agenda, we are going to be first telling a little bit about what is Terraform, but not going into much detail on that. Then we're going to do a little bit disclaimer about Terraform 0.12, and then we're going to go through the tips I've learned for each things like modules, states, naming, new resources. And well, don't panic and bring your child. Starting, well, I guess I don't need to go through the slides what Terraform is, but yeah. So if you don't know Terraform and you are here looking for more, you can go to the links on how to teach it. But this talk is really not about what is Terraform, but the tips inside it. So one disclaimer, if you are using Terraform, use the new version, which is the 0.12. All the code in this presentation is 0.11, but the tricks and the best practices I've learned, they're all 0.12 compatible. So starting for the first tip that I've seen, it's to migrate to 0.12, you use TF switch. It's a very nice tool. You can have multiple versions in Terraform, and it helps you to migrate and to test. So that's the first one. So moving on to the real insights, starting with modules. So modules is a good thing to have when you are coding, right? Because you want to divide your code as best as you can and organize it best as you can. And you should be using modules. If you're not, well, you should. So before in the beginning, I used to write my own modules for everything, right? And people in my team would use these modules, and I myself would use these modules. And it was very nice to write my own modules, but then I started to build a lot of them. And then in the future, I realized there is a good thing is if you can use modules from the community. So because the community, they have more tests, you can also help the community and give it a little bit back. And I found it to be more effective, right? So this is a second tip that I give you. So here in the presentation, you can see there are 2 links where you can go to check modules from the community. And one thing that I did, I still build modules on my own, but what I do, I use the modules from the community plus my business rules from my company, and I merge them and I make my own module. So that is the tip 3 to make it better, right? So you get the testing from the community, the support from the community, and your business rules, and you make your own module. So I think it's the best of the both worlds. So also a little bit about the inputs and outputs. If you have secrets, you don't want them committed into your version control, and you want to find a way to pass them as in the command line using TF vars, and also you want to secure your outputs using the sensitive attribute there. And you can also use a secret manager like Vault to handle your secrets. So it's very important that you don't do this, don't commit passwords and stuff to your repository, and Terraform provides you ways to do that, right? Also, one thing that I really liked is a tool called Terraform Docs, where you can generate automatic documentation. So as you can see in the screen here, it will appear very nice, inputs and outputs, and people can refer to this documentation when they want to use your modules. And it's everything nicely automatically generated, so you don't have to worry, except of course putting the description in your inputs and outputs. But other than that, it's everything very nicely generated. So that is the tip 6. So one other thing that I've struggled a bit was with module order and dependency. As you know, Terraform executes everything in parallel, right? And the order of execution you can establish by using one input as an input to the other module. There is also depends on, but it's not supported by modules, but it's something you can use when you want to chain resources and establish an execution order. But in this case here, you can see that we are establishing an order of execution by using one module as input as the other, right? So in this example, first you will be running you are receiving the ARN from the bucket, and the role ARN you will create it as a separate module. So as you can see, that's how you usually do it. But then there is also this issue sometimes that you cannot actually, you will face execution order issues where the two modules don't need to receive things from each other. So for example, I've run into issues where we had race conditions and like for example, a row runs and before it's fully created, Terraform already gets this row and uses somewhere else. And it's not really nice and it's a bit trouble. So this is an issue in Terraform, a very well-known issue. And it's very popular as well. The fact that you cannot use depends on between modules, or you cannot explicitly tell you the order, right? So the good thing about this is that last week actually, or 2 weeks before that, a person answering this issue, telling that this will be possible in 0.13. I have very much hope that this will be possible in the future. But yes, this is an ongoing issue that it's happening there, right? But to solve this problem, what I did, I started using Terragrant to manage my dependency. Because if it's going to get out for 0.13, we still are going to have this issue with 0.12 as well in Terraform. So I use Terragrant to manage my dependencies. As you can see here, there is a small way how to do it. So Terragrant will ensure that things will run in the order that I want them to. Terragrant is a wrapper on top of Terraform. So in the back, Terragrant will be running Terraform. And it has a lot of other features, some of which will be more discussed in this talk. So for modules, is just a quick recap. Use open source, make your modules based on the community modules, and use the auto documentation for your other teams, and use Terragrant for dependency control for now. So the next item in the agenda is the Terraform State. And in the Terraform State, it's something that you need to take care of, right? Because it maps your infrastructure to the real world, right? And it's important that you understand it. So when I was starting with Terraform State, I wanted the following requirements. I wanted to keep my state secure. I wanted to be accessed remotely. I wanted to have locking mechanisms so two people don't change my state simultaneously. And I want a state per environment and no manual creation of the state. So as you can see, the three firsts are supported by Terraform. And I was looking how to do this with environments and how to not manually create the states. And it was very tricky for me to, as a beginner, to understand it all. And at first I thought about the Terraform workspace that would solve my issue. But from what I've been seeing in the community and going to talks, Terraform workspace didn't sound like a very good solution. And there was a lot of pushback also from the community and the presentations I went to. So then to manage environments in the state, I'm also using Terragrant, right? And it organizes the state for me in a nice way. You can check in the Terragrant GitHub for more information, but I really like the way the state is built. For the next item is labels and tagging. Labels and tagging is very important for your infrastructure because labels in Kubernetes is really nice to be used. So you can label your resources, and tags in the case of AWS, which is my context, is really nice if you want to do some cost management. So it's nice to have it. I use Terraform to apply my tags, right? In this example here, I'm applying labels to Kubernetes. So you can see that I can have like reusable tags with environment information and also module information, which is really nice. So I can look at the assets in an AWS GUI and I can trace back in the code where in the moment that this was created or how this was made. So we also have this trace. As next tip, we have new resources. The rebel, I like to tell it as the rebel in Terraform. So it's the way that you run commands, shell script commands, especially for the things that are not supported by a provider in Terraform. So I had to use it for Kubernetes. One thing that I've learned with time is that very important for you to add triggers to your new resource. So your new resource knows when it has to be triggered. And also sometimes I need to run a command before two actions were done. And I use depends on here to also like, I want all this to be done before I actually run the command. So these are the tips I say here. So use triggers, use depends on, and do your thing, do your command. In this case here, I am creating some service in Kubernetes. Then we can also destroy with new resources with the clause when. So you can see in the screen that you say when destroy, and then you can actually program the create, the apply action, and the destroy, the Terraform destroy action. So depending on which one you use, you will have one command, for example. But one thing that that you have to be very careful with this, right? Because what happens with new resource is that it first tries to destroy, to then apply. It's a behavior, and I've learned this by an experience that quite shocked me a bit. I did this for a COPS command, which is our cluster manager. So I run our cluster manager, I run a delete and then a create. And while I was doing that, it almost destroyed my infrastructure, the complete infrastructure, because I thought that the creation would always be triggered if there's a change. But what happens is every time that this new resource is triggered, it will run a destroy and then a create. So then it almost destroyed all my environment. So you have to use it with caution. Always keep in mind that the new resource will be first destroyed and then will be created. Every time Terraform detects a change. So that is one thing. So keep that in mind. My infrastructure is still there, thank God. But yeah, this is something that you need to keep in mind, right? So looking at the local files now and templating. I use it a lot in Kubernetes at first, right? So you have a situation where you have a file and you generate a template with this file, save this file, and then we use it as a feed to Kubernetes. So in this example here, I am creating a config map with Terraform templating, and then I'm feeding it to a command that will run Kubernetes, right? But in the end, I thought this is not a good idea, because what happens is if you use a CI or something like that, every time that it runs Terraform, it will say, I'm going to create this local file. And that really can pollute the output of the Terraform plan. And I was getting annoyed because when you look at the Terraform plan, you want it to be as clean as possible and like with no distractions. I don't want to know if a file has been created in my machine. I want to know important things like what's going to be really changed, what is going to be run. So one thing that I started to do, I started to not saving this local file anymore, and I use as a feeder to the Kubernetes command. So as you can see here in the example, now I create the config map with the templating, and then every time it changes, this template, this rendered file changed, then it will run the Kubernetes command using this EOF thing, and then everything would be done, and I don't have more the local file as before being saved in my machine, and I have to see that all the time in the output. So this is one thing, and I've been always using this from now on. So as a next item, I would like to talk a little bit about the Kubernetes with Terraform, and specifically, so starting with that, why would I wanted to do this? Why not use only Kubernetes commands and don't add them into Terraform? So I wanted one execution tool. And I have several environments, so I wanted to seize the templating from Terraform instead of adding another templating technology into my pipeline. So I thought about it, like, well, if I execute everything with Terraform has templating, which I need for my environments, then why not? Also, I have situations where I need to do some stuff with Kubernetes, do a little bit more with Terraform, do a little bit more with Kubernetes. So I have this alternance, which can really like complicating things. One example for this is, of course, I want to create a load balancer with Terraform, and then I want to add my Kubernetes configuration to it or something like that. That is one example, right? Or adding the DNS records to it. So yeah, that was what motivated me to use Kubernetes on Terraform. So at first, I wanted to avoid new resources, right? I gave some tips on how to use it, but I prefer to not use it because you need to control the flow, you need to control several things. It got really complicated to manage. So here is one example for one deployment or one config map. But imagine this replicated like 10, 20 times. It's too much new resource, and you end up being a bit crazy. So I wanted to avoid using it, right? So I started with a new resource. Everything was fine, but yeah, it was not nice. So I wanted to try something else. So I started to experiment with the Kubernetes provider. So Terraform has a Kubernetes provider. And then I started using it instead of new resources. And it was quite nice for a while. But then I realized that I lost my YAML. And if you use Kubernetes, you know that YAML is your baby in Kubernetes. So I lost it. I lost it when I started to use the Kubernetes provider, and I was really upset by that. So in the end, I reached the conclusion, so for low maintenance Kubernetes resources, like for example, if you want to build a monitoring deployment, that you will trigger once and leave it there and touch it only like to upgrade or to do a few things. Then Kubernetes provider is the way to go because it has all this, it's built in, it's a provider. But for more complex deployments, like your application itself, where you need YAML, you need flexibility, and etc., I would advise using other tool or even continue using with new resource. So that is what my conclusions on that were. So moving on to the last part of the presentation, it's about like running Terraform. So I told you that I use like Telegram and Terraform and how all of these things get combined together. So I use Telegram, plan IO and apply O. So what happens is Telegram apply O will run all your modules in a specific order that he designed based on your dependencies, right? And it's nice because you see I can enter a folder, like an environment folder. In this example here, I'm entering into AWS development environment, and then I'm running the plan O. So in that development environment, everything regarding to that environment will be run and will be built. That infrastructure will be built and it show it to you, right? That's I really like. And if you run, you can also run apply all, which is we're going to apply everything. So you ensure that your whole infrastructure for that whole environment will always be run by Terraform and will always get into the state of what you desire, right? And Terraform has way more features that are not covered here as well, which is nice. But yes, that's how I've been running my infrastructure. And you also have the Terraform plan and apply, of course, for one module. So if you don't want to run a bunch of stuff, like all of the modules, you can run only one. Like when you are testing, like, oh, I'm changing this, so I'm going to test this right now. So for that, I still use Terragrant because, yeah, once you have it, you have it. So you needed to run Terragrant plan. But what it does, it's behind, it calls Terraform. So it's just like calling it actually. And what I also use landscape to make it colorful and pretty, so I can see, and I also can see the diff of my changes. So what it was before and what it was now, but in a more organized way. And you can see, like, if you build a JSON or something as part of your Terraform, you can really see the diff, and it really, really helps. So I really like it. You can use landscape as well with a normal Terraform without using Terragrant. So you do Terraform plan and the landscape, and you can see everything there. So, and it's also nice because sometimes the plan O and the apply O, it's really a lot of stuff. Imagine if you are running the entire infrastructure plan, it can be a lot of outputs. So it's nice that you can zoom in with the colorful, nice outputs, right? And that was it for my presentation. So I have, this presentation is bigger actually. I've condensated in 25 minutes. There is more tips in the slide share link that I'm sharing if you wanna check it out, right? And well, if you contact me if you want, my YouTube, my LinkedIn, and let's talk. And well, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.